Well, hi Phil, and I always say hi Phil, but of course Phil down here, as everybody now knows, is probably one of the world's best, and certainly locally does the most phenomenal photography. And Phil and Yolanda, I just want to say before we start, thank you for everything you've done for Lytham Hall, and in particular for a day like today when we can come and have a look round and see what's going on here at Lytham Hall. Now, of course, behind you, well, behind me, should I say, we're actually looking at the parterre. And of course, you've all seen the parterre before, but you'll notice that things are moving on fast. In fact, I've been doing some talks recently to various groups, and I'm struggling to keep up myself. I keep taking photographs and I come back the next week and everything has changed. And I'm sure, Phil, you've had the same problems. But isn't it good to see Lytham Hall is going ahead, literally full steam ahead? I mean, not only have we got the foul drainage works going in, which not before time is such a superb movement forward, such a good green idea, and we're pleased about that. Not very much disruption, and of course, as you'll see later in the year, everything will be put back the way it was before. But really, we're here to have a look at the grounds, the parkland, the Grade 2 listed parkland, the parterre, the Italianate parterre, and of course the South Prospect. There's a lot going on and a lot new in the South Prospect. So although you've seen this parterre area, and behind me over my left shoulder, you'll see a new hedge going in. This is enclosing what is going to be the most superb violet walk, named after Violet Clifton, and we'll have a look at that in a bit more detail soon. The grounds volunteers have been working so hard here, and the garden volunteers, and of course the new area has been designed by Greg Alderton of the Leafy Lytham, and of course our own Peter Anthony, the general manager. So Greg Anderton and Peter have been very, very busy on that, and this is actually now coming to happen. Okay, well, welcome to Violet Way, and as I mentioned before, Peter and Greg have done this superb design, which is really quite complex. There's a big theme going on here with the purples and the violets and the whites and everything coming in, and there's so much further on that we can't actually see the whole thing from here, and that's a good thing with the design, because one thing leads you into another, from the Italianate parterre all the way through the walk to Violet's bust further up, an arch which we'll talk about later, and then at the very, very end there will be the late Queen's Jubilee giant redwood tree, which we'll look at on a little bit later on. So this area is superb, and notice the way that this design picks up, the castellation picks up the coins of the actual hall, you know, the stones at each of the corners there. So we do have coins transposed to a ground design. Also, talking about grand designs, we have these pleached hornbeams, which echo our historic 300-year-old hornbeam, the hornbeam hedge along the estate fencing, and now here the pleached, which effectively is a hedge in the air, on stilts if you wish. And from a distance, and particularly I can assure you from upstairs, it looks absolutely superb, because they all join in together and give you that superb perspective. So in a moment we're going to move on to the far end, but just behind me you can actually see an archway, and we're going to have a look at that archway, because I wonder if you can think, what kind of plant would you have over an archway that's called Violet Way, after Violet Clifton, who's absolutely always feels to be here. She was, of course, the last of the squire's wives who actually lived here, the last person sadly to pass away at the hall in the 1960s. Well, here I am at the beginning of the arch, and just in front of me is where the bust of Violet Clifton will be, surrounded by local cobbles and all this area will soon have a new surface on. The area we looked at before will be planted up with perennials, as I mentioned before, and we have again a hornbeam circle here. But what I'm looking at here, this beautiful violet bud, which is only just beginning to open, is of course a wisteria. What else would you have for a violet cascade over this fabulous arch? Well, perhaps what you might have, because there's also the Jubilee tree, is paying homage to the late Queen Elizabeth II with all these beautiful Queen Elizabeth roses running, 96 of them, running all the way along the outside. So this again will be an absolutely outstanding feature, and there will be even more to come. But I won't steal Peter's thunder on this. He will have a lot to say about this as we continue with the development. But the volunteers have been working extremely hard here with all this construction work, all the planting, and things are beginning to look rather good. As I've mentioned once previously, we've had a very, very strange spring, but by golly, it's going to be good. And of course, the bluebells have told us that this is a very, very special year in more ways than one. Right, well of course here we are at the end of the south prospect. Obviously the prospect is taken from the house, so we're looking back north at the house itself and looking through that beautiful arch and an absolutely fantastic view. The focal point, if you like, at the end is clearly the house, but from the house, looking all the way down this magnificent creation, you have got the Jubilee tree, planted to celebrate the late Queen Elizabeth II's Jubilee, and what a fabulous Platinum Jubilee that was. And we are celebrating with a giant redwood. I'd just like to say that we are very fortunate here at Lytham Hall. I have mentioned before, but we actually carry the national collection for both the giant redwood, the Wellingtonia it's sometimes called, and also for the coastal redwood, or the Sequoia sempervirens. This is a Wellingtonia, or giant redwood, and it is an absolutely spectacular version of it. I planted some of these 50 years ago last month at Myerscough College, and this, although people say to me, why on earth are you planting a little tree like this at your age when you'll never see it, I'm just very pleased to look at the ones I planted 50 years ago and the ones the Victorian brought in the 1850s. This is for tomorrow. This is for you, your children and your grandchildren, and hopefully for all future generations, growing well in this perfect environment, the north of England, southern Scotland and parts of Wales. Well, here we are near one of what we call the Benmore cages that are around our national collection of giant redwoods. And the reason it's a national collection and the reason that we have different cages with different trees on is that in nature occasionally you get an unusual, if you like, a freak of nature growing. So instead of a green giant redwood you get a blue-green one. This one, Sequoiadendron giganteum, is called powder blue, and that's a cultivar or a cultivated variety because it is so good. So powder blue lives here. It has its own very special, what we call an accession number. That accession number is unique to the whole country. There is only one of this number on it, and around me we've about 6 others all planted in this area which are going to be part of the giant redwood collection, which will run to 30, 40, 50 individuals in due course. So we're keeping the deer out, we're looking after the tree, we're planting small because small establish quickly and small will grow well and will grow tall. The tallest ones in this country are at the moment well over 100 feet, 30, 40 metres tall. The ones I planted at Myerscough are over 20 metres tall and 6 metres in circumference. So they grow well in this environment. We know that from the Victorians, and they're going to continue to do so. They're safe here, but it's so nice that we're trying to keep this area with wildflowers in it. We're not keeping it immaculate. This is about nature. If we can't look after the trees, then it doesn't matter how many cuddly pandas or how many great whales you're worried about. There will be no oxygen, and don't forget, the plants were here billions of years before any animal even existed. Right, well, here we are. We've just come past the Dovecote, and this is the entrance to the new woodland garden, the Dovecote Woodland Garden. And here, as you can see, a beautiful Pieris forest flame. These are shoots, they're not flowers, and these will slowly go yellow, then a light green, and eventually dark green. Needing ericaceous or acid soil, we have to dose these with lots of acid material, and you'll no doubt see that as you walk through this woodland garden where we've put extra material in. But the whole idea is colour. It's also about getting people off the road, because the more people we get, the more cars we get. The more cars we get, obviously it would be nicer to be off the path and walking through the woodland and seeing the collection, which really is becoming quite a nice collection now of really, really unusual shrubs and trees. In fact, almost all the trees have actually been sponsored by the general public or by organisations, and we have a system at the office where people can actually sponsor a tree, and it has been absolutely unbelievable the number of people that have said, I would really like to help out. We've been coming here for years, we've never seen such development as has happened in recent years. The area we're going to go into, this woodland garden, leads on to the lily pond, which we've looked at before, and the beauty of this one, we've only been doing this for 2 years. This was brambles, invasive Rhododendron ponticum. We've said all this sort of stuff before, and you've seen the paths we've done. And the volunteers have literally worked miracles with the clearance. They are so dedicated, I can't say thank you enough to them, because having the ideas and finding the plants and deciding perhaps where they go and what you've got in your mind's eye is only the tiny little beginning. So the design is the day, the construction may be a week, but now we need to maintain forever and for the future generations, as we've talked about. So we'll have a little look inside in a moment. Well, here we are, this path that we've actually made through what was really a forest of self-seeded sycamores. It's really quite incredible. It's an oval, So it's a circular path if you want to do the full circuit. We're planting lots of unusual and rare plants. In the last fortnight we've planted 7 magnolias, we've planted nearly 30 rhododendrons, and 2 years ago we started the planting of the main rhododendron for the colour, to entice people in and come and have a look. But the basis of this was, I mentioned before about rhododendron, and we've got an awful lot of brambles here and there, and because we're not using chemicals and we're doing all this by hand with small machinery, we're actually chopping those down slowly over a matter of years until they become a growing area with light. And when I first came here some 12 years ago, there were no bluebells here. And I've mentioned this before, but I'm just so pleased that 2023, the very special year, is the year of the bluebell. And of course we've got the coronation coming soon, and the bluebells this colour are a very, very special colour. It is no exaggeration, they are the best I've ever seen them. These actually arrived here in a wheelbarrow many years ago when I started transplanting throughout the whole 78 acres from an area over there that's only half the size of a tennis court. After that, with all the volunteers arriving, we started collecting seed. We now distribute 500,000 as a minimum every single year. Wherever we haven't got bluebells, we seed those, and in 3, 4, 5 years' time, we have this. And I think you'll agree it is worth waiting for. English bluebells, you will see the odd white one, you'll see the odd pink one. These are naturally occurring varieties in nature. But here we've got magnolia, beautiful Magnolia Susan over there. We've got all sorts of dogwoods. We've got, I know you can see just about in the background, again, that sentinel rhododendron, the red one that I try and put in to attract people to say, "Ooh, what's in there, let's have a look." Lytham Hall is growing in so many ways. The collection is growing, and in time to come we're going to start labelling this all up for you, so you'll be able to look at a plant you particularly love, and you'll see as we go through this woodland garden, we're about halfway through the clearance and we're planting all the way through to the lily pond. So please come, please have a look, feel free to ask questions. Right, now some people might call this wild gardening or ninja gardening, all sorts of things. I just call it accepting, after all my experience in horticulture, that actually you work with nature, not against nature. The manicured areas are superb, but they belong where they belong, for the design nature. Here, for various reasons, we can't go pulling all these nettles up. We just can't do that. We can't control the brambles totally, but using the word control, of course, is the clue. It's what nature does. It's a plus and minus, it's a control system. So when you see something as beautiful as this Photinia, sometimes called red robin, although that's a cultivated variety. This is Carré Rouge, by the way, which is probably the best cultivar, or one of the best that there absolutely is. Contrast in the back. I don't mind the fact that we've got brambles, we've got bluebells, we've got obviously the nettles, and lots of what most people call weeds, working in harmony. And it's so nice to see the exotics within the nature. Because after all, over the centuries and the thousands of years, a lot of things coming into this country that used to be exotics are now natives. I say that, they're not strictly natives by the definition, but you know and I know that we're getting milder winters. So we've got things like the Photinia, we've got things like the rhododendron species and cultivars rather than the ponticum, which causes problems. And what we've got, which is most important, nature is happy in here. You can hear the bird song, but from where I am now, there are thousands of little insects creeping about. I can see some of them. And this is what we try and do. So you might say, well, how on earth do you manage nettles and brambles and grass in amongst the bluebells. It's totally natural. What we will do, we'll wait until all these bluebells have seeded and the seeds are ripe. We'll collect the seeds, we'll scatter those somewhere else. A lot of them will fall where they stand, and then we'll trim back. And that'll stop this bramble growing to my height and swamping this, and for that matter these. So it's simple, work with nature, take your time. It's taken 3 years of managing those brambles down to this height, and we need to keep going. And by the way, if ever you think that we're actually trying to control nature, if I was to walk away with them and the volunteers stopped doing this for 3 years, you wouldn't see anything other than brambles, nettles, a metre high, and nature would take over in her way. We're just working with, not against. Right Phil, well we've just come through into the lily pond area, the Japanesque part of the garden, and it really is superb. And this is one of our latest Japanese maples. What I like so much about this is the peace and the serenity, the wildlife, the bird life. I can hear in my left ear the baby herons being fed. I can hear the birds singing away, and it's absolutely beautiful. But I wanted to just point this one out, this Japanese maple. So it's Acer palmatum. It's one called Trompenberg, but notice how it's got these rolled leaflets. It's often called the lobster claw maple, or sometimes the dragon's claw maple. It's absolutely one of my favourites. Beautiful, beautiful maple. And as you can see, we've lots of maples, and people come here from far and wide. And the beauty of seeing so many people is they keep saying to me, it's changed so much since the last time, and we were only here a month ago. And of course that's what happens. The more we plant, the better the season, the more we look after this. You can see the beautiful rocks in the background. Normally we'd like to keep them on view, but of course at the moment we're just getting ready for the fabulous, and it really will be fabulous, foxglove season. So that will follow on. We try, if we can, at Lytham Hall, always have something colourful to show you. Right, well, here's one of my absolute favourites. Now this is the weeping Katsura. A beautiful Japanese tree, and very unusually this, when you smell it, particularly in autumn, but even now, it smells of toffee apples or burnt toffee. Beautiful. But it's quite rare because it's actually weeping, forms beautiful autumn colour. So Cercidophyllum japonicum pendulum. best Japanese tree, in my personal opinion, ever. And you can imagine planting it here, the whole idea, the design idea, is reflection and obviously that beautiful autumn colour later in the year. And if we look on this side, we've got rhododendron here, and incidentally the white marking on here, as you might have guessed, is all about birds. This is one of the largest roosts for the lovely little white egrets. We have up to 80 of them coming at nights, and it's not surprising that there's the odd white leaf. Here behind me, just rustling in the breeze, there's something spectacular about this maple. This Japanese maple is Acer japonicum Enkan, E-N-K-A-N. One of my absolute favourites, very finely divided, very delicate, and sets itself off really against that water. And we haven't quite finished, because to complete this picture and the reflection from the beach on the other side, underneath we have a tiny little laburnum tree that's going out over the water that will have its golden rain of flowers, which will again be reflected in the water. So it's all part of a picture we're building up. Nothing short term in horticulture. This is about long term. If you haven't got the patience, you won't get the garden. It's very simple. Well, this is a bit of an unusual view in some respects, especially from where I'm standing, because I'm looking through the branches of yet another weeping tree, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But as you can see, we are preserving the remains, the ruin if you like, of the boathouse. We're making sure that it's stable and safe. And what I'd just like to point out, I think it's very important to remember people who've helped us in the long distant past, and we're very heavily involved with Lytham Hall for decades, and that is the late Alan Ashton, who actually planted that fabulous Japanese flowering cherry behind us. It's very, very narrow, Prunus amanagawa, the Japanese name for it. I know it's difficult to see, but I have never in the whole of this country ever seen such a tall one. It's on our island, it's a Japanese garden, and it belongs there, and I'll always think of Alan, and always do, every time I see it in flower. What's even more interesting, of course, than just knowing that people have had something to do with this is what happens as a result. And here we are again with one of our donors having donated towards this beautiful tree, and this is a weeping cercis tree. Very unusual, and we'll take some close-up photographs, but this flowers actually from the stem. It's not even in leaf yet, but the flowers are opening. And this, as you can imagine, with the rocks all arranged in Zen fashion, have got this, it's got this beautiful outline. It's got the water, and again, as I've mentioned so many times, we're thinking about reflection, we're thinking about design, and weeping trees are just so good for that. So here we are with that lovely, lovely weeping tree. It'll have purple leaves, by the way. We've got a bit of a purple theme going on just round here. And of course the lovely background there of the original boathouse, built in the very late 1800s. Well, Phil, just to finish up, it's probably a lovely place to finish. We talked about the idea of reflections, and I reflect back on the fact that this is coming into only our third season since this was a wilderness of rhododendron, ponticum, brambles and the like. In fact, we nearly lost some volunteers. The thickets were so thick you couldn't see people working. And I want to just mention this tree, Styrax. And the reason I want to mention it is not because of the tree itself necessarily, but the shape. It is the most beautiful, elegant S shape, so revered by the Japanese designers. And I hunted high and low to find this tree, and thank goodness I wasn't trying to purchase it in London. So it's just coming into leaf. Keep your eye on it. It is going to be spectacular. Look in the background, you've got that reflection, and all around it we've got the camellias flowering, we've got the bluebells, and a few months ago, saying goodbye to winter, of course we had the most spectacular snowdrops. And as I look up there, I say hello to the lovely little herons up there, and cheerio to you, because next time I can assure you there'll be something even bigger and better to show you. Thanks for being with us today.